The first time I saw that ranch, it looked like it had been holding its breath for years. A long stretch of dry wheat curled in on itself in the sun, like it had given up growing and settled for just existing. The house stood at the edge of it, weathered down to gray bone, boards dried and warped from wind. The porch slanted west, like time itself had leaned on it too long. One side of the roof dipped ever so slightly, not broken, just tired. And the sky overhead, it was too wide and too still, like the air was waiting for something to break. I came up slow. My horse was a ribby thing, head hung low, and my coat dragged like I'd been wearing it through every bad mile between here and Missouri, which I had. She stepped out onto the porch before I even said a word. Not afraid, not welcoming either. Just standing there, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like someone who'd already lost too much to be impressed by a man covered in dust. "You Clara Winslow?" I asked, voice low from the ride and a dry throat. "I am." No hesitation, no softness. I dismounted, no show to it. I moved the way I always did, like getting up too fast might pull something loose inside. I tied the reins without looking at her again, just let my hands move. That always helped when the words got stuck. "I saw your posting." "You come to take it or pick it apart?" "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you meant what it said." She didn't blink, just stood there in that crooked light like a fence post driven deep. "I do." "I don't need a man," she added, voice steady. "I need protection, on paper. A second name on the deed. Enough presence around here to make Harold Grant think twice before riding up again. You get meals, roof, your name recorded legal. 3 months. Then you go. Clean." That was the deal. Plain. Cold. No space for fantasy, no room for redemption stories or romance or some preacher's version of healing. And that suited me just fine. "I'll sleep in the barn," and I told her. "You don't owe me a place at your table. I'll eat on the porch. We don't share meals, not at first." She nodded once. Didn't thank me, didn't need to. I walked past her without another word. Her kids were inside. I could hear the quiet shift of feet on floorboards, the creak of a chair, a girl listening, a boy not making a sound. I didn't ask their names. She didn't offer mine. That was the point. I'd spent enough years moving from one place to the next, clearing brush, driving cattle, sleeping under sky, under roofs, under suspicion. Every town a fresh start I didn't want. Every job a piece of penance I never quite earned. Missouri had been the last time I'd tried to stay. That was before the boy got shot, before the bounty went out, before I buried my own and left a war that never really ended. Since then, I just rode. But when I saw her flyer outside the general store, something pulled me up short. Seeking husband. Temporary, 3 months, no intimacy, no questions, compensation, name on land deed. It wasn't the words that stopped me, it was the way they were written. No sugar, no script, just need. No promise of love, no offer of salvation. Just someone trying to keep what was hers. And maybe, in that exact moment, that was all I wanted too. To help someone hold on, even if I didn't belong to anything myself. So I came. The first night, I ate on the porch, didn't look inside, didn't knock, just ate the plate she left for me and set it back on the step. Her cooking was plain, good, warm. I hadn't eaten food like that since before. When I turned to go, I caught a glimpse of her in the window, arms tight, watching. Didn't bother me. She had every right to be wary. I wasn't much to look at. Scar across my eye, coat stitched too many times, boots worn down to whisper. But I moved steady. I worked quiet. That counted for something. I rose early the next day, before the rooster even figured out how to crow, stacked the hay neater, hung my saddlebag up proper, took the wire brush to the old pump handle, got the rust off. Not because she asked, because it needed doing. She found me out there with my sleeves rolled and a cup in her hand. "I made coffee," she said. I took it, nodded, didn't drink right away. "What should I call you?" she asked. "Boon," I said. "Last name's the only one that matters anymore." She didn't flinch. "I'm Clara." Another nod. No need for more. "You done this kind of work before?" I looked at the busted gatepost behind her. "Enough to know your tools are dull." She raised an eyebrow. You always this friendly? Only when I like someone. No smile, no sarcasm, just truth. She respected that. I could see it. Didn't mean she trusted me, but it was a start. Later that morning, I caught the girl staring through the window. Hattie, I'd learn later. Tough eyes, sharp chin, arms crossed like her mama. She came out a few hours after I'd fixed the fence. You got a wife somewhere? I wiped my brow. No. Children? I hesitated. Not anymore. That's when Clara came around the side of the house with laundry in her arms. She froze, just a second, when I said it. Didn't press, but I saw it, the flicker in her jaw. She knew loss when she heard it. The girl didn't say anything else, just nodded like she'd filed it away and walked off. That first day, I fixed more than I spoke. The barn hinge, the coop latch, sorted old tools in the shed. I didn't ask where things were, just figured it out. The boy, Jonah, watched me from the porch, sitting in the dirt, dragging a stick through it like he was drawing thoughts he couldn't say out loud. I knew that silence, wore it myself for years. He didn't come close, but he didn't look away either. That night, after supper, Clara stepped out onto the porch. I was pacing near the barn, couldn't settle. Never could when it got dark. You all right out here? She asked. I don't sleep easy, I told her. From what? I didn't answer. She didn't push. She sat on the top step, didn't say a word. I walked over, sat nearby, not close, just close enough. We didn't talk about the war, or Missouri, or whatever buried her husband under a horse. We just sat in the quiet, and for once, that was enough. Jonah came out after a while, dragging his blanket, didn't ask for his mama. Walked straight over to me, leaned against my side like he belonged there. I didn't move. And Clara, she didn't stop him. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't just filling space. I wasn't just a name on a deed. I was starting something I didn't have a name for yet. If you've made it this far, you might already feel it. This ain't just a story about a man and a woman trying to hold on to some dry stretch of land. It's about what happens when people who've lost everything stop running. It's about trust earned without words, family rebuilt from scratch, quiet moments that carry the weight of whole lives. And if that kind of story speaks to you, the slow, true kind, I hope you'll give this video a like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Because this story ain't finished, not by a long shot. There's still thunder on the horizon, and you're going to want to see how we weather it. The days that followed passed in a quiet rhythm that I hadn't known in years, not the kind of quiet that presses on your ears like loneliness, but the kind that settles deep in your bones, the kind that makes you realize how long you've been waiting to exhale. I worked from sunup till near dark, not because anyone asked me to, but because I needed to. Because my hands always did better when they were moving. Because rest was the place where memories crept in, and I wasn't ready to face those ghosts just yet. Fixing fence posts, tightening hinges, clearing the shed. It wasn't just labor, it was penance for the things I'd done, for the ones I couldn't save, for the boy back in Kansas who looked too much like my own. Clara didn't say much to me during those first few days, and I didn't ask her to. She watched me work the way a hawk watches the line of a mouse's trail, not aggressive, just alert. I could feel her eyes on my back when I lifted the broken gatepost, when I hammered the new beam into place, when I rolled my shoulder just so because the old ache from Missouri still hadn't left. She didn't ask about it, but I saw the way her brow creased when I favored my right side. She wasn't cold, just worn thin, like she'd patched herself up too many times and now she wasn't sure which seams would hold. The children, now, they were a different story. Jonah didn't speak to me for the first 2 days, but he watched everything. The way I tied knots, how I leaned into a board before testing its weight, how I sat down slow like I was hiding something in my knees. He didn't ask questions, just mirrored me from a distance, drew shapes in the dirt with a stick, followed the curve of my shadow like he was studying it for signs. And I let him. I didn't speak unless he did. Some kids needed space more than sound. I'd learned that the hard way. Hattie was another matter. She was all edges and eyes, sharp as a file, and just as unforgiving. One afternoon, while I was resetting the coop latch, she walked up like she owned the whole sky and said, "You got a wife somewhere?" Not hello, not even her name, just that. I wiped sweat from my brow, let the question settle. No, I said, slow and steady. Children? I paused, felt something hitch in my chest. Not anymore. She didn't blink, just nodded once, like she'd marked something off a mental list. Then she turned and walked off, and I watched her go, wondering if I'd just passed some kind of test or failed it altogether. Clara came around the house just after that, arms full of laundry, and froze when she heard my answer. She didn't say a word, but her mouth twitched, and for a second she looked like she wanted to ask me something, not to press, just to know, but she didn't, and I was grateful for that. There was a moment, a morning maybe 3 days in, where I realized I didn't feel like a stranger anymore. I wasn't family, not by a long stretch, but I wasn't a ghost either. I'd become a fixture, like the windmill that groaned when it turned, or the mule that kicked when you came too close. Jonah stopped flinching when I walked by. Hattie started leaving the door open a little wider when she passed through. Clara poured coffee and slid it toward me without a word. It wasn't warmth, not yet, but it was something. And then Harold Grant came back. It was a dry afternoon, sun hanging low, dust curling up from the ground like smoke. I was working by the coop, hammer in hand, when I heard the hooves, steady, slow, not rushed, not casual either. The kind of pace a man uses when he wants to be seen, but not feared. I turned just enough to catch a glimpse of Clara walking out the front door, apron still dusted with flour, her hands wiped clean but clenched. Her posture changed, not fear, not exactly, just steel, like she'd been bracing for this moment for weeks, and finally the wind shifted. I didn't move at first, just watched. The man rode like he thought the land owed him something, spine too straight, eyes too smug, boots shined to a mirror. His horse looked better fed than most children in town, and when he dismounted, he didn't tip his hat in respect. He did it like punctuation. "Morning, Miss Winslow," he said. "Morning," she replied, flat as iron. He glanced at me, smirked. "I heard you took on a new man," he said. "Interesting arrangement, seeing as the deed's still in your name alone." I didn't respond, just stood near the fence, one hand resting on the edge of my belt. I didn't need to act tough. The kind of men like him, they respected silence more than swagger. "That's being handled," Clara said. He gave her that smile, the one men give when they think they've already won. "I brought something by," he said, reaching into his saddlebag and pulling out folded paper. "This here's an updated claim request. Judge Hawthorne's inclined to approve if your mortgage isn't resolved in the next 30 days. She didn't flinch, just reached out and took the paper like she was accepting a piece of firewood. Didn't even look at it. "You've already filed it?" "Nothing personal, just business. You've got 2 children, Miss Winslow. You shouldn't be breaking your back for land you can't hold." Then he looked at me again. "You the hired help?" Still, I didn't answer, just let him hear the quiet. Clara stepped forward, voice low. "We're managing just fine." "Suit yourself," he said with that same smirk. "But don't say I didn't offer a kind hand before the hammer came down." He turned to remount, but that's when the girl, Hattie, came walking out of the house, barefoot and dirty from shelling peas, and she went right up to me like I was just part of the day now, looked up at me, then turned to Grant and said loud enough for God and everyone to hear, "Are we still fixing the roof today?" He paused. Clara blinked. I didn't move, but I felt something shift in my chest. "Yeah," I said, "after lunch." The corner of Grant's lip curled just enough to show how much he hated hearing that. He rode off faster than he'd arrived. Clara and I didn't speak for a while after he left. She sat at the table inside, finally opened the document, and her mouth tightened at what she saw. "He's not bluffing," she said. I stood in the doorway, watched the dust settle. "She's clever," I said, thinking of Hattie. Clara nodded. "Too clever for her own good." I looked at her, then down at the floor. "That man's trouble, I know. I've dealt with men like him." She studied me then, really studied me. "What kind of dealing?" I looked away, my jaw clenched before I could stop it. "The kind that ends with blood," I said. "Not by choice, just the way some things go." That was the most I'd spoken since I got there, and she didn't press me further, but something in her face changed. For the first time, She didn't look afraid of my past, just curious. That evening, I sat on the porch rubbing oil into an old saddle hinge while the sun dropped behind the hills. My hands moved slow, steady, not because I had to, just because I needed something to do to keep from thinking too much. Jonah crawled over, quiet as ever, and held up a horseshoe. "Is this broken?" he asked. I turned it over in my hands. The metal was worn, pitted from time, but still strong. "No," I said, "just worn, like you." He looked at me, blinked. I waited for him to laugh, but he didn't. "Like you," he said. I stared at him for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, like me." And that night, as Clara lit the lamps inside and the children curled up in their blankets, I sat outside by the barn, listening to the slow wind roll over the fields, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to run. I heard the hooves before I saw the man, and the second they touched down hard and clean against the packed earth, I knew trouble had finally caught up to me. Not the kind of trouble you can lie your way out of or bury with sweat and quiet labor, the kind that carries a name, a face, a badge crooked on the vest, and a memory I'd been trying to outrun since the day I left Kansas. I was near the shed, wiping down an old coil of wire, when the dust line appeared in the distance, sharp and straight, not like a neighbor come calling, but like someone following a scent. The way that man rode, not fast, not loose, but locked in, I knew before his boots ever hit Clara's porch that he was here for me. She stepped outside first, egg basket still in hand, but her whole body went still, just enough to show she'd felt it too, the shift in the air, the change in direction. I didn't run. I'd done enough of that. Instead, I stepped out from behind the shed, slow and steady, my hands loose by my side, the sun warming my shoulders, even though my gut had already gone cold. "Afternoon, ma'am," the man said, pulling up near the steps. "Name's Decker. I'm looking for a man goes by Elias Boon." Clara's voice was calm, but I caught the slight tightening in her throat. "He's not here." Decker didn't believe her. Wasn't meant to. "That's so," he said, and he smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes, 'cause his trail leads here, and I tend to follow trails real careful. I stepped into full view, and when his gaze met mine, I saw that spark of satisfaction, like a bloodhound when it finally corners the scent it's been chasing. We stared at each other across 20 feet of dry earth and dry wheat, and it wasn't hate in his eyes, wasn't justice either. It was business, and I was just a ledger mark he'd come to settle. He looked me over slow. "He's wanted," he said to Clara now, not me. "Not by the law, not yet, but there's a bounty out of Kansas, private claim. Some rich cattle boss's boy ended up dead after a dispute. Boone was there, rode off before anyone could ask questions." I stood still, arms at my sides, heart steady but heavy. I didn't interrupt, let him say it. Clara didn't flinch. "He hasn't done anything wrong here." Decker's tone stayed level, smooth. "Maybe not, but it's not about here, is it?" I knew he was waiting for me to protest, to deny it, to call it a lie, but I didn't. My silence wasn't guilt, it was weariness. I looked at Clara then, the way she had stepped closer to me instead of backing away. I didn't expect her to speak. I didn't expect her to stand between us, but she did. "If he's leaving," she said, "he does it by choice. You've got no jurisdiction here." Decker gave a short laugh. "That's so. You planning to protect him?" "I'm saying this is my land, and he's under my roof." Her voice didn't waver, and for a second I forgot the weight of Decker's eyes and remembered what it felt like to be worth something again. Decker didn't like it. He looked between us, sizing it up, figuring how many shots it'd take, how many witnesses would be needed. His smirk faltered just a little. "I'll be around," he said, stepping back toward his horse. "Tell your man he's got 3 days. After that, I take him, one way or another." And then he rode off, not rushed, just patient, like a man who knew time worked in his favor. When the dust settled, I stayed right where I was. I didn't want to see the way Clara looked at me, didn't want to feel the crack that might have opened between us. "You should tell me to go," I said finally. She didn't. "Is it true?" she asked. I nodded once. "I didn't kill that boy, but I didn't stop it either. We were drunk, words got sharp. He reached for steel. I disarmed him and walked away. Someone else finished it. She watched me then, not as a judge, not like a woman trying to measure guilt, but like someone who'd known enough pain to see through it. That someone still breathing? I shook my head. No. She nodded. I didn't ask about your past, Boon, but it's standing in my yard now, so I need to know. Are you going to bring war to this place? I looked at her. No more masks, no more soft shoe dancing around the truth. No. You sure? I won't let him touch you, or the kids. Her arms were crossed, but she stepped down from the porch and stopped a foot away from me, closer than she'd ever stood before. I've had enough men promise me things, she said. You're still here because you've kept quiet and worked hard. If you're going to stay, it won't be with blood, not if it lands on my porch. I nodded once, slow and firm. That night I sat by the window with the rifle close but untouched. I didn't sleep. Jonah came out around midnight, blanket trailing behind him like a ghost. He stood next to me for a second, looking at the gun, then up at my face. You scare? He asked. I looked at him, voice rough from the silence. Yeah, a little. He nodded like that made sense, then crawled into the chair beside me. Didn't ask more, just sat, and we waited together for Decker or dawn, whichever came first. The morning cracked open quiet, but not peaceful, the kind of quiet that crackled under the surface like fire under wet wood. Clara poured coffee without asking. I took it with a nod. Neither of us said good morning. Decker's not bluffing, she said, hands flat on the table. 3 days means 2 if we don't act. I didn't answer. You planning to leave? No. You planning to shoot him? I didn't move, but my jaw tightened. That was answer enough. I told you, she said, firm, not on my porch. I met her eyes. If I don't stop him, he'll just come back, maybe with more men. Maybe next time while I'm not here. I don't want your kids caught in that. She stood, went to the drawer, and pulled out the deed papers, folded, worn, kept next to old thread and a shaving brush she hadn't thrown away. She smoothed them out on the table like she was about to fix something broken. I've been thinking about that deal we made, she said. I blinked, waited. Name on paper, 3 months, no promises. I nodded. I remembered. I want to change it. That stopped me cold. I want to make it legal, marriage by law, public. I leaned back, not from fear, but like bracing myself against something I hadn't expected to feel again. Why? Because if I'm going to protect this place and these children, I need to do it out loud, not in shadows. And the law only listens when you speak in its language. You being legally tied to this ranch puts us on even ground. With Grant, with Decker, maybe more. I stayed quiet, not from doubt, but from the weight of it all. She softened then, voice not quite so hard. You've been here a few weeks, Boon. This place hasn't been quiet like this since Henry died. Not the house, not the kids, not me. She looked away, just for a second. I don't know what kind of man you were before. I just know what kind you've been since you got here. And I know Hattie doesn't look at you like a stranger anymore. Jonah sleeps through the night now. I looked down at my hands, calloused, scarred, still. You'd have to stand with me in front of a judge, she added. Say the words, sign the book. That all right with you? I nodded. If it keeps you safe, I'll do it. She didn't smile. Just said, that's not what I asked. And I met her eyes again, this time without hiding. I want to stay, Clara. I want to help, but I won't lie to you. My past isn't clean. It doesn't go away just because we sign a paper. Neither does mine, she said, and she reached across the table, laid her hand over mine, her touch steady and warm. We don't need to make it mean more than it is, but I think we both know it already does. And right then, in the half-light of a morning not yet decided, I believed her, not because she offered me a second chance, but because she never once asked me to explain myself. She just saw me and stayed. Riding into town beside Clara that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, not fear, not shame, but the strange weight of being chosen, not hired, not pitied, chosen. The saddle creaked beneath us as Jonah sat between us, holding the reins with his small hands like they were already his to guide. The road was dry, dust rising behind every step of the mule, and I kept my eyes forward, not because I was trying to hide from the stares, but because if I looked too long at her, Clara, sitting straight-backed and certain beside me, I might not know what to do with the feeling that rose in my chest. She didn't say much. Never did. But her silence wasn't cold. It was deliberate, like she saved her words for what mattered, and that day she meant every one of them. We tied off in front of the courthouse, stepped up the worn plank steps with our shadows side by side, and when we opened the door and found Judge Hawthorne behind his desk, smirking like a man too used to power, she didn't flinch. She laid the papers down in front of him like placing a hammer on a nail. "We're getting married," she said. "Today." I added, "By law." The judge looked us over, skeptical as a snake in tall grass, and tapped his fingers on the desk like he was waiting for someone to blink. But neither of us did. He didn't like being outmaneuvered, especially not by a woman who refused to beg and a man who refused to explain. But the paperwork was clean, witnesses lined up. The ink dried before the sun dipped past the water tower. Just like that, Clara Winslow became Clara Boon. No flowers, no preacher, just dust, sweat, and the kind of vow that doesn't need a single extra word. We rode home in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable, just full. Like both of us knew we'd stepped across something bigger than either of us had expected when we started. That night, Clara stirred stew over the fire with one hand, while the other rested against her hip. The children were already tucked in. I stood by the door, arms crossed, unsure if I should speak or wait, when she turned to me, eyes unreadable in the flicker of the flames. "You're not sleeping in the barn anymore," she said. I nodded once. "Where then?" She gestured toward the couch. "There, for now." And that was it. No ceremony, no slow undressing of emotion, just one step closer toward whatever it was we were building. She stepped past me a moment later, her hand brushing my arm briefly, deliberately, not romantic, not hesitant, just real. "You didn't ask for this," she said, "but you haven't run either." I looked at her, not quite sure how to hold that truth in my chest. "I stayed," I said. "That's all I know how to do now." She nodded, quiet approval in her eyes, and walked away, leaving me standing in the light of the fire, not alone. The calm didn't last. I knew it wouldn't. Not in a town like ours, not in a world where a woman claiming her own damn future unsettled every man who thought her place was beside his boot. By the second day after the courthouse, word had spread like brush fire in high summer. Clara didn't need to be told. She could feel it in the way old men paused outside the feed store when she passed, how the preacher's wife stopped waving from her porch. The kind of silence that wasn't absence but judgment, not because she married me, but because she'd done it for power, not love. And power in the hands of a woman made people nervous, but Clara never flinched. I admired that about her. She didn't explain herself, didn't justify what we'd done. She walked straight back through town, chin high, like she knew exactly who she was and who she wasn't. But the real trouble showed up 2 days later when I saw Harold Grant leaning against a post outside the saloon, speaking low to Decker. Two men cut from the same cloth, polished boots, entitled hands, crooked smiles. I didn't have to hear them to know the storm was getting close. That night, I checked every door, every window latch, every round, and every rifle. I didn't say a word. Neither did Clara, but she saw what I was doing, and she didn't stop me. Later, with the children asleep, Jonah curled tight against his sister's back. Clara stood at the edge of the porch holding a lantern, staring out into the dark like she could will the trouble to stay put. "I've got one foot in this place now," I said, stepping up beside her. "Feels wrong to keep the other ready to ride." She didn't turn, just nodded. "Then don't." I stared out at the fields. The grass moved in waves, soft and slow. "If he comes," I said, "I won't run." "I know," she said, "but you should be ready. If things turn bad." "You think I haven't had bad already?" she cut in, voice rising just a little. I looked at her then. "Boon, I buried a husband. I've worked this ranch with my hands bleeding, raised 2 kids under the thumb of that bastard Grant. I never asked for help. You think now's the time I scare easy?" I didn't say anything, because she wasn't asking me to. She just needed to say it out loud, and I needed to hear it. The next morning came like a hammer, not in noise, but in weight. I was out by the field with Jonah, teaching him how to reset a snapped wire. He mimicked my movements, slow and serious, not speaking much, but watching close. He'd become my shadow in ways I hadn't expected, and I didn't know what it meant to feel that kind of responsibility again, to be looked at like I was steady, like I wouldn't break. Clara stood at the kitchen window drying her hands. I caught her watching us, her face unreadable, except for the way her shoulders weren't so tight anymore. Then the sound came. Hooves. Not 1, 3. I looked up, and everything in me went still. Decker was out front before I could make it to the porch. 2 men riding with him, one tall and sharp-eyed, the other broad, slow-moving, hired guns, not amateurs. I stepped off the porch as Clara came out, holding Jonah's hand and tucking him behind her. She stood tall. I moved beside her, close but not touching. I wouldn't reach for a gun until I had no other choice. "Mr. Boon," Decker called out too cheerfully. "Didn't take my warning seriously?" I didn't answer, just kept my eyes on his hands, his boots, the twitch of his horse. "I'm giving you one more chance. Come quiet. No drama, no blood." Clara stepped forward. "He's my husband. He's on the deed. You got no right here." Decker sighed, like a teacher scolding children. "The law's a funny thing, missus. It don't always care what he says when bullets start flying." And that's when the neighbors came. 3 men from the farm down the way, gathering by the split fence. Old Man Gilly, the preacher's boy. Even Miss Lauren, the seamstress with twisted hands but sharp eyes. They didn't come to help, just to witness. Clara saw it too, understood what Decker really wanted. Not just an arrest, but a message. "You shoot him here," she said slowly. "You lose your bounty. No money comes if he's dead." "You really willing to walk away empty-handed just to prove something?" Decker smirked. "No, but I don't have to be the one who fires first." His man shifted. My hand moved just slightly. "Don't," Clara said, stepping in front of me now. Her voice was low, urgent. "You draw, they shoot. I'm not letting you get hurt." "And if I don't, you might," I whispered. "You shoot. You prove them right," she snapped. Then she turned to Decker. "My husband's staying. You want to take him? You walk past me." The moment hung heavy in the air. Then came a sound none of us expected, Hattie's voice. She'd stepped outside, barefoot, holding her father's old hunting rifle, arms shaking but face like stone. "You leave my pa alone," she said, "or I'll scream so loud the whole town hears me." Everything stopped. Decker looked at her, then at Clara, then back at me, and then he stepped back. "Not worth it," he muttered. "Too messy." He turned to his men. "Let's go." They rode off, not fast, but tight, like a pack that knew it had lost something it couldn't get back. When they were gone, I dropped to one knee, not from pain, just from the relief of what didn't happen. Clara placed a hand on my shoulder. "You didn't run," she whispered. I nodded. "Didn't need to." And from behind us, Jonah called out, voice still small, but clear. "Are we okay now?" Clara looked at me. I answered for both of us. "We are." Sometimes peace comes not like a trumpet, not like a shout, but like breath you didn't know you were holding, finally letting go. After Decker rode off and the dust from his horse's hooves settled, it didn't feel like a victory. Not the kind with celebration or certainty. It felt like something held back by force had finally exhaled. My knees gave out as I lowered myself to the porch, not from pain, just from everything that could have happened, but didn't. Clara stood over me, one hand on my shoulder, her grip steady like always. Jonah peeked from his doorframe, his voice small, asking, "Are we okay now?" Clara didn't hesitate. "We are." And somehow, just hearing her say it out loud, I believed it. The days that followed weren't loud or dramatic, they were ordinary. And that, I learned, is what safety often looks like. It's not in the silence of danger, but the noise of life returning. The wind through the wheat sounded different after that, so did the creek running over stones near the back pasture. The mule even quit eyeing me like I was something to be dealt with. He didn't warm to me, but he tolerated my presence, and in his language, that was affection. I stayed busy. There was always something to fix, a loose board, a stubborn hinge, a gate that hadn't swung right since the winter Henry died. I didn't ask for a list. Clara didn't give one. I just did what I saw needed doing. That's how I've always spoken best, through hands, not mouth, and in return she met me where I stood, with warm coffee, with quiet glances, with the way her jaw stopped tensing when I stepped too close. She didn't ask me to come into the house full time, not with words. One evening, while I was drying off after mending a burst water pipe, she passed by with a towel in her hand and said, "If you're staying, you might as well stop pretending." And I did. That night, I left my bedroll in the barn for good. Hattie never said much about it, but she stopped closing her bedroom door all the way, just enough to let the light in. Jonah started drifting to sleep faster, curled close to the hearth when the fire burned low. He'd taken to leaving his drawings where I'd find them, little scratched-out sketches of horses, fence posts, and once, me. Just a rough stick figure, but the coat was right, and the eye. The one I don't see well out of, cloudy and drawn with a smudge like he knew. We didn't become a family in a moment. There was no line drawn in the dust, no sudden declaration. It happened slow. Through shared chores, through eggs gathered before the sun rose, through meals eaten shoulder to shoulder, not speaking, but understanding more than words could hold, through the steady rhythm of care. The day Clara handed me Hattie's old boots and asked if I could resole them, I didn't say a word. I just took them, brought them to the shed, and worked quietly. Not because I had to, but because it felt right. Because I wanted her to have shoes that wouldn't let in cold when the season turned. That's when I knew I'd stopped being a stranger. There was a day, near the end of spring, where I looked around and realized everything was still standing. The barn, the house, the people inside it, and it wasn't luck. It was effort. Will. The kind that gets built slow and stubborn. That's when I started to feel like I belonged. Clara still had her guard up most mornings, but it wasn't the kind that pushed people away anymore. It was the kind that watched over something worth protecting. I saw her soften in small ways, when she handed me coffee before I'd even asked, when she leaned into the porch rail a little closer than usual, when she spoke without that edge in her voice, like maybe she wasn't preparing for me to leave anymore. One afternoon, after we'd finished shoring up the fence line together, she stood looking out toward the hills, arms crossed, the sun brushing golden across her hair. She didn't turn to me when she asked it. "You ever think about leaving again?" I let the question sit in the air between us before I answered. "Used to," I said. "Every day." "And now?" I looked down at my hands, calloused and steady. Then I looked at her. "Now I think about finishing what I started." She raised an eyebrow, still not smiling, but something in her face softened. "And what's that exactly?" I stepped toward her, slow and sure. "This," I said, "all of it." Because it was true. What we built wasn't fast or loud or dramatic. It was careful, earned. Like planting fence posts by hand, digging deep so they don't lean when the wind comes back. That's what love turned out to be. Not something you fall into, but something you hold up with effort, with patience, with time, with the willingness to show up again and again, even when it's hard, especially then. The town eventually stopped whispering. I think folks finally saw that I wasn't just a name on a deed. I was a man with calluses on my palms and a boy in my lap come sundown. I was the hand that held Clara's when the mule kicked again and the roof threatened to leak. I was the voice that read from the old book when Jonah couldn't sleep. I wasn't running anymore, and they stopped looking for me too. One night, Clara and I were sitting by the fire. Jonah was asleep nearby. Hattie was in the kitchen pretending not to listen. Clara had a quilt in her lap, hands working slow. "You think this lasts?" she asked. I took a long breath, then nodded. "Only if we keep choosing it," I said. She didn't answer, but she didn't argue either. We both knew what we were carrying, what we'd survived, and what we were building now. That kind of love doesn't show up in grand gestures. It's found in patched roofs and mended boots, in the silence that doesn't feel empty, in the steadiness of a man who stays. There's a lesson in all this, if you're looking for one. Maybe more than one. That healing doesn't always come with fanfare. That sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stay. That family isn't always born. Sometimes it's chosen. And that a man's worth isn't measured by his past, but by what he's willing to carry forward. Who he shows up for when it matters most. I never thought I'd have a second chance. Most men like me don't. I thought Missouri was the last chapter. I thought silence was the only thing I had left to offer the world, but Clara changed that. Hattie, Jonah, the porch rail that doesn't creak anymore, the coop that stays latched through the wind, the coffee mug waiting for me each morning. Turns out redemption isn't a gift, it's work. It's earned, slowly, quietly, with hands that shake a little less each day. And if you've made it this far, listening to me talk about this ranch, about this family, about this woman who didn't flinch when the law came calling, I figure you might carry your own weight, your own stories. Maybe you've run, maybe you've lost, maybe you've been the man sitting in the barn wondering if you still matter. If that's you, let me say this plain. You do. You matter. And it's not too late to show up, to stand still, to plant something worth tending. And if this story has meant something to you, even just a flicker of warmth, a breath of hope, I'd be honored if you'd give this video a like, leave a comment below, and follow the channel. We tell stories here that grow slow, that dig deep, that mean something. Stories for folks who still believe in building things that last, even when it's hard. Especially then, so stick around. We've got more coming. And if you ever wonder what happened to the drifter who rode up to a ranch needing nothing, well, he stayed. And that made all the difference. Let me know if you'd like a video title, description, or visuals to go along with this epilogue, or if you're ready to start the next story from Elias Boon's voice.